Awesome.
Okay. So what I've done is I've taken the contingent sale process and I've looked at it for what a subject is, the concept or purpose for what's going on, then also the contract terms. But I'm referring exactly to the exact spot in the contract, and also not in just the contract, but also the other forms referred to. There are 8 other forms that come into play. And there's 2 forms that when brokers don't know what they're doing, throw into the deal, which blows the deal up. And so if you see any forms other than what we have listed out here, a red flag goes up. That form doesn't belong in your purchase and sale agreement contract. And that's where you need to stop, make sure that you don't go forward and you don't let that get signed by your client. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to focus on Form 22B. And 22B has 7 sections, and I have them over here on this Excel and all 7 sections. And I don't care whether we get through all of it today or not. What I do care about is the interaction and making sure that you're comfortable with this. So when you get this product, if it works right for you between the forms and the overview matrix, a month from now, you'll forget all about this course, but you have a contingency opportunity and you'll have a kind of a quick reference guide and a kit to refer back to. But I think once you know how this works together, you'll be able to manage that situation and get up to speed, educate your client, and have that transaction managed the way it should be. Okay. So in doing that, the way I started out is the Form 22B. This is going up until I get to mutual. And in this concept, if I get into Section 1, Section 1 really is all about the first premise. And I guess one other thing last week, I went through a narrative that we wrote as far as what the buyer and the seller are really talking to each other about. Hey, I want to buy your house, but I got to sell mine first. Okay. And so in doing that, the first part of that conversation is, yeah, that's fine, but I want to make sure you try to sell it as fast as possible because I want the deal to close as fast as possible. So if you want me to sell my house to you, promise me in 5 days after mutual, you're going to have it listed. Okay. So this is what Section 1 is all about. Along with that are there consequences if I don't do it in 5 days? The answer is yes. And that's what's described here also, is that, you buy okay? No problem. So if the property is in mutual acceptance of this agreement, but if you fail to do so, the contingent shall be deemed waived and paragraph 6C shall apply. Okay. If buyer has not sold buyer's property or given notice of waiving, 2 options, this contingency by the end of the contingency period, then this agreement shall terminate and the earnest money refunded to the buyer. For the purposes of this addendum, the term sell or selling or sold means that they've entered into a valid mutual purchase and sale agreement for the buyer's house. Okay. And if I go to 6C, 6C is a waiver. So you're either going to terminate the contract or he's going to have to waive and close. And if he waives, this is not what the purpose is really written for, because it's an option. But here, because it came from Section 1, it is a mandatory to waive. And if you do waive, you waive all of the contingencies in the contract, which includes financing, includes inspection, anything that's a contingent in that offer. So it's a pretty big deal. And you got to close in 30 days. So right out of the chute, right in paragraph 1, which isn't a very big paragraph, there's a whole lot going on. So what I did over here for us is contingent buyer, you got to list your property, house number 2. It's no longer active now. The selling agent, which I have up in here above, has to turn around and move the status from listing to contingent. And then in doing that, that's called out for. The buyer must have active listing within 5 days of mutual acceptance. And again, in my situation, I've always had buyers that have a house over on the other side of the mountain. They're not here local, so I'm not listing the house. I need to find a buyer that has a broker that I can trust on the other side to work with me as a team, because their behavior could blow up my deal. If this is, and we'll see more and more of this happening, but I also want to know what the CMA is for that house, what their condition is, how fast they think they can sell it. And that has to do with the notes from last week. So if I get to the next one, what if there's a listing failure? He doesn't do it in 5 days. He's waiving the terms, and he shall close within 30 days now. And here, this is where I'm referring to in Form 22B, item 1, line 10 and 11. This is called out, and also lines 59 and 60 on 6.6C, which I just went to. So lines 10 and 11, I'm coming back. I have a quick reference here to lines 10 and 11 right here. That's where I'm calling that out from.
I've got a quick question on that one.
Yes.
This particular scenario where they failed to list the house.
You bet.
Have you or someone you've worked with had that happen, where a buyer came in, was contingent, and failed to list on time? And that's really 2 questions. Has it happened? 3, I guess. Has it happened? Have you had, you as the listing agent or a listing agent tried to enforce on paragraph 6C? And have you had a buyer try to wiggle out from under that, or did they say, fine, it's waived, we'll just buy it?
I have not had missed my 5 days personally.
Have you
And I have not coached anybody that has.
Okay. Yeah, because that seems like a big, I just wonder how many buyers, because I've seen plenty of contingent contracts, plenty of 22Bs come through. And I do wonder if the buyers understood that, because I've seen a few where technically they were out of contract, where the buyer did not list within 5 days. And unless I wasn't paying close enough attention, that then they changed the timeline.
This is a good time for me to show you
Yeah.
this. This is acceptable. There's no way to calculate a closing date. You either leave it blank or you can write this in. This is something that Ashley drafted, and I'm using her as an example. And it also has a 22A in it. That date is completely irrelevant. Also, Form 22B controls time. But the reason I thought was interesting what Ashley did is that she wrote this addendum in her offer. Reference Form 22B, buyer's sale of property, contingency item 1, contingent sale of buyer's property, line 10, changed to read 9 days.
Interesting. So rather than scratching through, which we're not supposed to do.
It's you can do that. It's just as far as being professional and going to the standards of an attorney, using the proper form and do it the proper way keeps your contract clean, and it's easier and less confusing. But you can change that 5 days.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how often.
If you believe that happens, I don't know how often.
But I'm just wondering how often, buyers get into that default 5, don't pay close enough attention, get it listed within 6 or 7 or whatever. They're technically, everyone's out of contract.
You're out of contract.
And but they just move forward with it anyways because the sellers are happy that they're getting their home sold.
Has to do with the 2 brokers in the deal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because your buyers ever sit down and really read the contract?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, really, unless I read it to them, I don't think they've ever really read it. Very, very few times. I don't think a lot of brokers read the contract. And there's a lot of scary stuff happens. As long as everybody's happy, you got a good deal. But if somebody talks to an attorney, then it's game on. And if I made a sloppy contract, then shame on me. That's when it gets dangerous. But out of that 5 days, it's pretty clear what happens. If you fail, this contingent is deemed waived.
You pretty much have to buy the house.
And that's it. And if you can't buy the house, then you're in default. And default means it's at the fault of the buyer, not of the seller, which means the seller keeps the earnest money, which is another red flag I put in my note yesterday out to everybody. If that happens, we are not in the limited capacity of law to do that interpretation and advise the seller on the use of that earnest money, because earnest money in default is for the purpose of damages, not for penalty. So you have to prove damages if you're challenged. And we're not in that. That's a lawyer's job, not a real estate broker's job. And that's where we have to advise our clients to talk to an attorney.
I mean, if it's assumed that the buyer defaulted and that they're at fault and everything, and you've got a buyer's agent who's willing to just sign around a disbursement of earnest money, do they still need to seek legal counsel on that? Or if both parties are in agreement, yeah, we screwed up.
If you fail
we keep
to
the earnest money.
advise your client and then they have a problem with that, they're going to turn around and look right at you. Why didn't you advise me?
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, that's why I'm out of all of these forms that we go through, I keep trying to make the gray, darker gray and brighter white of where we're working within our limits as an attorney versus when we start seeing it getting really fuzzy and the gray starts going away and we're over the line. And when that's over the line, we got to protect ourselves. That's why we put form 22 RA in that contract saying, we're advising you to talk to an attorney. We do everything we can to make sure that we advise that we know where our boundary is. We can select forms and we have to select the correct form. And then we have to fill it out correctly. But when it comes to interpreting, then we have to be very, very careful. Okay, so when this starts getting in that line, and in this particular case, 90D and 90E, which we have that we'll pull up and be looking at when we get down here, those are the two things that give notice from the seller to the buyer that the contract is terminated because of the failure. And we're going to the remedies in the contract. And the remedies in the contract, where did it go? The remedies in the contract are on line 11. Oh, excuse me, line 8, default. And we either check the box failure for earnest money or we check the box seller elects remedies.
No, I've never checked that box. That spooked me as a buyer's agent. I don't want to put my buyer in the seller's hands.
Well, you limit the damages and you take away the argument how you calculate the damage. So all you have to do is show causation. And once you do that, then you don't have to argue about what the money is because you check that box. That's why it's so advisable to check the box. Earnest money limited to that amount. And you don't have to make any calculations to prove the damage is because the buyer and seller pre-agreed to it when they signed the contract.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that we're talking about, I'm getting the glasses out. So when I refer to this, when I come down, this is, if you're waiving your contingency, you've now got 30 days to close. And that's what comes in. If you fail to close, now you have a different situation. This is where it's a default and the loss of earnest money. And I have right here, seller is advised to talk to a lawyer regarding earnest money. And I put right in here, this out of this line 56 and 60, I have 90D and 90E and then an F50. So if I pull up a failure to close, notice of termination by seller and then seller to keep the earnest money, that's if they check that box. Okay. If they check the box for electing remedy, then there's a specific form for this. Notice of termination by a seller to elect remedies. So depending on which box, there's a specific form for it. As a broker, if we don't pick the right form and use it in the situation, all of a sudden we're breaching our duties as a lawyer. We got to know what forms to use. And that's why everything in here I have listed out that way to help keep us from picking the wrong form.
Is there a situation where you would recommend or have seen someone actually check that seller's election of remedies box instead of the forfeiture of earnest money? Because it just seems like you're putting your buyer at the seller's mercy.
You know something, I feel very strong about that.
Yeah.
I had 40 years in construction, and out of that 40 years, I was either a cost engineer or I worked in contracts divisions. I'm an arbitrator, I've been a mediator, I've been in litigation for almost my entire career at some point or another, because being a cost engineer, I'm putting things together and it's always about damages. And damages have to do with the damage of time, value of money, which is very fuzzy.
Yeah.
And so it's a big argument. If you have to prove what the actual dollar amount is, it's an enormous amount of work that takes experts that have to be hired and retained, not only by the buyer to put it together, to defend, by the seller to put it together, but the buyer's attorneys are going to have to hire experts to refute it, to argue the other position. So now you have two lawyers with two sets of experts trying to calculate a number. Whereas if you check the box and say $2,000, you eliminate all of that cost in an argument.
So in short, you would never advise someone to say seller selection. Right?
That's my personal professional opinion, because I have blood on the tracks from my career before I became a real estate broker, that I always found that if you can reach an agreement when everybody's happy, when you sign a contract, about how to either take it apart or how to take a bad situation and resolve it while it's friendly, then when it occurs, it's less bloody and the emotions aren't as high.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, that particular checkbox there has always spooked me. I've always wondered why.
Well, if you're working for the buyer, that's why you're choosing with the buyer about how much to put down and how much the sellers to make them happy. I always start low, and if they accept it, I'm pretty happy. I think I did a good job for my buyer.
Yep.
Now, if I'm a listing broker, I'm doing the opposite. I'm trying to say is that I want the default to sting them.
Yeah.
Get their attention. They're still going to listen 5 days. My God, they're going to listen 5 days. They're going to have to lose their earnest money. Wow. I guess I got their attention. So, I mean, there's two sides to our responsibility when we represent a client, from the buy side versus the selling side. Okay. So I always recommend the 50, because these are the arguments where your escrow offers and title company get in trouble, and they don't want to release it to the wrong person. So a Form 50 usually accompanies the notice form, so that it can say this amount of money is going to go to the buyer, or this much to the seller, or this to a listing broker. I mean, it's very clear about who this is going to go to. And it's signed by not only the buyer and the seller, but also the brokerage firms and the brokers. So it's pretty clear. That's it. So if you give that notice and the buyer puts their hand up and say, wait a minute, I think I should get the earnest money, I don't think the seller should keep it, then that's fine, because now they won't sign that form. And if they don't sign that form, everything stops. Title company holds on to money and lawyers get involved.
File an interpleader, right? It's like just $500 to start.
Whatever the lawyer says.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's the chain that this goes down. And if you, I'm going to flip back to what I was talking about last week, is why I emphasize so much in that form I have for going through talking to that buyer before I write an offer. And I want to make sure, if I'm not going to be the selling broker because they're not in town, is that other broker going to go out and evaluate that house and convince me it's in shape to sell? It doesn't need deep cleaning. It doesn't need any painting. It doesn't need a new roof. It's in good shape. They believe they believe it'll sell in 2 weeks. That all. I want to see a CMA. I don't want that broker to be my best friend during this transaction, and that I have permission to have open dialogue with that broker, because I'll also want to have the selling broker be able to get on the phone with me with that other broker to give them a warm fuzzy, so they can tell their seller, I think you should accept this offer. These guys have done their homework and they think they can sell. I talked to the broker, they think they can sell. I mean, this is the contingent sale process can be a very smooth process, but you have to get ahead of it right in the very beginning before you write it. It'll pay off dividends for you. Okay. So here we are, just in paragraph 1. See how much fun that was? It was just a short paragraph. So then I go to item 2. So the seller's consent is required on the sale of buyer's property. Oh, really? So the seller goes, oh, wait a minute. Wait a second. Wait. I just thought of something. If you're going to sell your house, I want to make sure you don't sell your house and it's going to be under 30 days, because I can't get my act together fast enough here and get ready to move out of my house. Or if it's over 60 days, holy crap, I'm waiting around forever for you. I'm waiting 45 days for you to find a buyer, and then you turn around, then you accept one for another 60 days. Hey, it's gonna be Christmas time before I ever get one. So if it's over 60 or under 30, I want it to have written approval before you go mutual with that offer. That seems fair. Oh, and by the way, if they write a contingent offer on your house, oh, wait a minute. I want to have written approval before you go mutual on that house. That seems reasonable. So that's what this one's all about. And those are the two conditions, A and B. Now, if buyer accepts any such offer without seller's prior written consent, seller has 3 days to terminate this agreement from the buyer's notice that the contingent sale is satisfied. So if they go and don't get permission to write mutual, they have an obligation to give them notice that they have mutual. They got to do that. And they have to provide a copy of the contract attached to it. So that's when we turn around and go, hey, wait a minute. You didn't get my prior consent to accepting that contingent offer. So here we go. Which notice shall include a complete copy of the purchase and sale agreement for that sale to the buyer's property. And upon the seller's termination, buyer shall be in default and the seller shall be entitled to remedies as provided for in the agreement. If seller does not timely terminate, the agreement shall not be affected. So if the seller delays 3 days and doesn't respond, then everything just goes away and keeps going forward like normal. And I put a little note in there, form 21-1, line 8, default, earnest money, boxed, checked, the earnest money is to the seller. So when I come over here now, I'm going to come down and say, okay, so now we're into where is it?
Tom, may I ask you a question on that?
Oh, wait a second, contingency time. I skipped something.
You might-
Yeah,
The written notice, where is that? Just an email? Is it a form?
I just,
What is that referring to? I'm sorry.
okay, you're talking about the written notice for,
We're in paragraph 2. So if it's under the 30, over the 60, or the contingent,
When the seller's
Where-
consent is required.
right.
What does the seller use? Do you send the seller a form and say, here, sign this? Or do you just need an email?
Well, here we go. Okay, let's say, so accepting an offer, there's no problem if it's between 30 and 60. Seller written consent is required for 2 conditions. There's condition 1. There's condition 2. Okay. And consent is required. That means that so as I come down, failure to get consent, okay? So buyer's in default, seller has 3 days to terminate. That's the clause that we're reading on line 21. 21 to 20, was it 21, 23? So seller has a choice. Here we go. He's going to terminate. Let me just see what we got. (90E) seller to elect remedies. 90E. I thought I had that up here. Where is it? So I pull up 90E. Notice to terminate the seller and elect the remedies. Now, if you check the box for return of earnest money, then it's form 90D. Okay. Pardon me?
Such a better form. 90D.
It is.
Yeah.
Electing the remedies to me is an invitation for a long litigation. This is one for earnest money. So that's the form that you would use. And also with that form 50 for return of earnest money.
But I think Sarah's question, and I think we saw it on there, is 90L is the one that the seller would use to give them permission to move forward with the contract if it was under 30 days, over 60, or contingent,
Okay.
right?
Okay. 90L, line 12 and 15. This is if I come over here. So here's 90L. And this is the seller's consent form. So if you have seller's notice of consent for delaying closing, you check this one. For seller's notice of consent for second contingent sale, that would be that one. For the consent for a pending sale, so there could be one where I get an offer that has a pending sale form in it, like is that 22Q. Or the seller's consent for extending closing, that would be if it's over 60 days. And then if they wanted to accept one for expedited closing under 30 days, then they would use that one. Okay. So 90L addresses all of those situations. And when I come down here, it says for the seller, this is line 20 through 23 for over 60 and 24 through 27 for under. So that's why I like this little matrix out here, because for what your question is, if I came in, consent required, and it has the forms by which you can do the consent on the right-hand column. Okay. Because this was my problem is that if you don't use these forms every day, trying to go into Northwest MLS into the little form area there and start searching, it's real easy to miss them because I mean there's 1,000 forms in that thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I have a place to collect them. So when you are going through and you're asking these questions, I try to, you see how I designed this thing is consent required, failure of consent. This is where your quick subjects are. And then I try to give some explanations for what's going on in the contract. And then I lead you right to the actual contract and all the forms that are associated to it. And if I find a hole in that, and we find a hole in that, we'll fix it. When I'm hunting for holes, because I've never.
You're gonna find it before me.
Well, you know what, and that's great, sir, because I've never really shared this with anybody before. And so getting it into this class and having other people try to look at the same thing, that's where I find out what makes sense to me might not make sense to you. That makes it a better product. And that's what we're trying to do in our team, is try to elevate everybody together to write better contracts. Yeah. Okay. So then I make it into the section, I have a section for failure. I do the same thing. So if they fail, the seller has a choice. They can, within 3 days, they'll have to write a 90E. I have the 90E up there. Okay, that's my, yeah, that's my D and the E. Yeah, that's the D and the E, the same thing as the, there it is. So either D is for the seller to keep their earnest money, or for electing remedies, one form or the other. With the 50, I probably should put a D or E there because it could be either one depending on what that is. And now in the seller's option to continue, if you do nothing, if they do not terminate, which is the seller's choice, then there's no effect on the contract. That contingency is waived. Which now what that means is when you waive that contingency is that you must change the active from your status from contingent to pending. And what that does for the buyer is nobody else can kick them out of first position now. They can't get bumped. And so that's a big deal for when that changes. Okay. So that was just a paragraph 2. Any questions before we move on? Yeah, for a little 2-page form.
Oh, there's a lot in there.
This is dynamite. Jeez. First time I read it, I was going, oh, that's pretty clear. It's not bad. Then stuff starts happening and you go, oh, God. So loan application. Oh, this is a fun one. Loan application. So the seller goes, wait a minute, wait a second. If you're going to have a Form 22A and you're going to get a loan, you can't sell the house and have enough money to buy my house and you have to get a loan too. Then I want to make sure that you 5 days after mutual go down and get a loan application. I want to, make sure you paid your fees. I want to see it. I want to know. Well, buyer comes back and go, whoa, wait. Oh, yeah, you had all this other stuff. You're beating up on me. How about you wait and let me wait until after I get mutual on my house and then I apply for a loan. So in this crazy form, you got two options. And you also have a form addressing this on 22A, which creates an ambiguity. So they clarify the ambiguity by very clearly on form 22B saying anything that has to do with those dates and closing dates and any other dates on 22A. This controls, so that kills that in 22A. It's no longer relevant. That's why I said I could have left it blank when I wrote out the offer, because this one here is where it controls. Okay. So let's just look at loan application. This agreement is a contingent on the buyer obtaining financing from 22A. The buyer shall make written application of the loan defined in 22 and pay application fee required within, if you check this box, 5 days after mutual acceptance of this agreement, or 5 days after buyers satisfying contingencies in this agreement. If neither box is checked, the buyer is not required to apply for the loans until after satisfaction of this contingency. The timelines in Form 22A shall not begin until that time. This paragraph 3 supersedes the requirements for buyer's loan application 22A. Okay. So I'm coming over here. Here we go. So 22A. You got two options. They're defined in 22A, item 1A, and on 22B, line 3, 26, and 32. There's two boxes that you can choose, option 1 and option 2. This is where you found them in 22B, and I put in here very clearly that Form 22B supersedes the terms and times of 22A finance addendum, and it's written on line 32. There's line 32. It's written there. Where?
2021A is what it shows instead of 22A. There in the box that's clicked in right now. Form 22B supersedes the terms for, there you go, right there. It says 21 instead of 22. Fixed it. There we go. Awesome. Yeah, and this all makes sense. That option 1 is identical to what's in Form 22A.
It is.
And then option 2 just makes that 5 days contingent upon
Another mutual.
Yeah, another mutual.
A different mutual.
A future mutual, yes.
Okay, let's talk concept for a second, because I don't care if you represent the seller or the buyer. As a real estate broker, if you have somebody that is sitting on the fence and we have a deal waiting for to sell their house, and then they finally turn in their loan applications and then it fails, you wasted all of this time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it better off to know that you're going to be able to get the loan satisfied? As a matter of fact, the inspections have been through, that anything in these contingencies, I push for having done as fast as possible. So the only thing remaining is selling the house. As soon as that house sells, man, things are greased up. We got a done deal.
And most lenders should be able to base their decision on the general value of the house. And
Sure.
then once it gets appraised, once it goes under contract, they can adjust some things. But it's nice to get it to the beginning of underwriting as early as possible. Yeah.
It's absolutely. And inspection, because what if they have a really long inspection, you turn around and they say, oh, I want a new roof. And you got everything doing, you got your houses now under mutual and the deal is all going great. And all of a sudden now he double dips and wants to negotiate and have a new roof and, replace the refrigerator or whatever, and all of a sudden that starts coming. You go, wait a minute. That turns things ugly for the parties when you're really deep late into the deal. I'd rather flush all that out in the first 3 weeks while you're waiting for somebody to get that house. I mean, that's just, again, that's a Tom thinking, but I have always been an advocate of doing that when I have a deal. How are we doing on time?
Do you not have the standard 10 days for the inspection?
It depends on how you fill out the inspection form, because it's attached to this purchase and sale agreement. If you have an inspection addendum, it depends on what you agree to, 21 days, 40 days, 10 days. I
You
mean,
could do less than 10 days if you wanted to.
if you wanted to.
I
But
mean, I've
if
seen
you,
inspectors get out there quick.
if you did the standard 10 days, that would be from mutual, not
From
from
mu-
whenever
it'd be-
it was satisfied.
Yeah, that's right, just right from
Okay.
you. Yeah.
He's saying the loan application is similar to that and that he wants it done within the first 2 weeks.
Sure.
Like, just-
Yeah, I have never checked the box for the second option on here. I mean, you know, my buyer starts wanting to have that, I'll talk him out of it. I'll turn around and say, you want to know if you want this home, the sooner you know you can have that home and be confident you're going to get that loan, the better for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how are we doing time wise? Because I get lost. Are we running out of time or do we want to keep going or?
We're at 12:28, so we got another 15 minutes or so.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
So property remains on the market. Okay. So now I got the loan fee going here. And the seller turns around and goes, well, if I'm sitting around here, tick tock, if I get another offer, I want to be able to accept another offer. Okay. So what are the rules for that? So here we have seller keeps property in a contingent status. And the seller receives notice that a buyer satisfied or waived the contingency. And they're waiting for that to happen. And while that's going on, prior to that time, the seller accepts another offer. Seller shall give notice to the buyer and shall give them, and they can select how many days. 5 days is default. For the buyer to make a decision, 5 days if not filled in, or by the expiration of the contingency in paragraph 1. So if the time runs out, the contract's terminated unless you extend the time by addendum 34. Whichever is earlier, the bump period to waive or satisfy this contingency, if the buyer does not, what you're saying, so if this thing gives them 10 days to respond, and in that 10 days it expires, well, contract's terminated. Whether we expired answers or not, it's gone. So the buyer does not timely waive or satisfy this contingency, this agreement shall be terminated. There's terminate, and the earnest money is returned to the buyer. Seller's notice shall be on the bump notice form 44 or similar, and buyer's reply shall be on a bump reply form 46 or similar. Buyer's waiver of this contingency also waives all other conditions in this agreement, including financing and any other contingency. If buyer waives this contingency, the sale of this property shall close 30 days after buyer's waiver. Okay. So the way I broke this thing down is during the contingency period, one or more of the following will occur. So the seller receives a notice contingency is satisfied from a contingent buyer. Okay, so if that happens, we're into a 90K contingency notice where it's satisfied. All of a sudden, that second buyer has to go away. I'm now in first position. It changes from contingent into pending, and buyer's happy. They locked it up. That's one thing that could happen. Another thing that happens is the period could expire, in which case 22B, this is on line 33 and 34. We have a 90K, it expires. I want to get my earnest money back. It's terminated. Third thing that could happen, the seller receives a notice that contingency waived by the contingent buyer. So in this case, a 90K, we're going down that nuts. Where's 90K? I thought I had that up there. Oh, there it is.
And Tom, this is different. Satisfied and waived are different here, right? So satisfied would mean that they sold their house. Waived would mean that they didn't sell the house, but they're deciding to pay cash or some other.
Satisfied, we go forward. Waived, dead deal.
Oh, so the contingency being waived means the deal's dead.
Oh, no. Wait a second. What did I say?
I was, the difference between the contingency being satisfied and the contingency being waived.
Okay, satisfied means the contingent is removed and you go forward.
Yep.
If it's waived, it's replaced with a new condition.
Okay. I see.
Okay, so if I have it, if I say contingent satisfied, all of a sudden it now goes from contingent to pending. We've advanced to a place we can't go backwards in the contract and keep going to closing, correct?
Yes.
If I waive the contingency, now I have kind of a curveball path that I'm still going forward, but there's another hook that I have to satisfy. And in this case, on a 90K, this is where contingency is satisfied. Buyer accepts the offer. This notice is effective. The buyer attached a copy of the complete purchase and sale agreement. But it says, if the property fails to close, buyer must give notice to the seller 2-day notice as required by the buyer's sale of the property contingent addendum. Failure to close and termination, failure to close and reinstatement. This is an interesting one because let's say that I have the house sold and I've got everything waived and now it's gone pending and everything's real happy and then the deal falls apart. Oh, nuts. Just when I thought everything was going so well. You can't get financing. Now, if I'm in 45 days and I'm only 30 days in, I can reinstate and go back and start and keep going the way I was going and find another buyer. Huh?
Does that reset the clock entirely?
No,
No. So
no.
we're still-
no, it's just reinstates it.
Okay.
Doesn't start over, reinstate until the time is remaining. Or if I don't have enough time to reinstate and the time's run out, I can turn around and say, wait a minute, I got failure to close, but I'm going to waive. And if I waive, then I also have to waive all my inspection, financing, and everything else, and I got to move to closing. And the other waiver is this is just a pure waiver that anytime during this period, the buyer can turn around and say, I'm just waiving everything. Let's
Like
go.
if they tried to sell their house, it just sat on the market, whatever, they're like, well, we've got the cash.
We got the cash, or I got the loan, or I had the loan came through, where I have enough to do it without it. Let's just go for it. Okay. So this form is a pretty interesting form. So as I come back in here, the seller, did I have the reinstatement in here? Seller satisfied, time period expires. Seller received notice of contingency waived by the seller or by the buyer. And then this is also 90K, and then also seller and buyer mutually agree to extend the contingency period. If that's the case, you just have a form 34. You say reference form 22B item 1, line 8, change to read, extend contingency period to enter calendar date. I've done that. I've done that 3 times. I mean, I've done it where the seller was really good. We actually extended it twice.
Wow.
And
Was it friends and family?
no, it wasn't. But they had their
Real
house for
nice.
sale over in Mukilteo, and it was on the water. I thought sure it would sell fast. It didn't. But you know, it's a great house, and so the seller extended it. So that is another option. And then item 5, seller receives and accepts another offer on the property, and if that happens, the seller writes a bump notice and says, "You're out." Okay. Then we get into bump notices. And we get into some really serious liability here. The offer that comes into that seller, odds are it does not have a Form 39 because brokers just probably don't even know about a Form 39. So you need to write a counter offer and put a Form 39 in.
This is different. So, it often gets confused with backup offer, but we're not using 38A, we're using 39, which is a second offer.
I have some materials we're going to be going through on backup offer and also pending sale, but in the misuse of forms. And this second backup offer or second buyer offer. Now I have a situation where a seller
I'm sorry.
is going, gee, I got this guy here now I got this guy here, but what if I drop that guy and then pick up the new guy and then have problems with him and take forever closing? So it has options in here to say, which boxes can I negotiate to check? To give me a warm fuzzy, said, you want me to kill another deal and take your offer. So are you willing to waive the Form 17? Are you willing to approval of an inspection of the property and improvement of the property, including but not limited to structural pest control inspection, Form 35, septic, and also 22? Second, buyer's approval of a review of the property and determine if the property can be used in a manner consistent. Feasibility contingency, you want to waive that one? You want to do an approval for condominium sales if it's a condo? How about the financing addendum? Or maybe there's some other thing I haven't thought of, but the more that I can get that buyer to agree to waive those things and say they're satisfied and approved, then I'm happier about accepting that deal. So there's some negotiations on that need to take place. If you don't use Form 39, you can't do that. And so that's where I really put a big red flag on this one. And also, what's even more important, if you go mutual on that purchase and sale agreement without a Form 39, you now have mutual contract on 2 different contracts for one property. It's against the law to do that, by the way. So I think that's over the line for being a real estate broker that's acting as a lawyer. That should be a no.
That's a big, yeah.
Holy smokes, can you believe that? I mean, that's how important this whole area is. I'm turning around right here. I say, warning, listing brokers, beware, you must have Form 39. I put a little one over here. I want to make sure. Failure to use Form 39, 2 contracts in one property. And I put down each one of those from that form in here to try and bring that forward and what line these are at for negotiating. Sarah, I just want to make sure you catch this one.
Yes. Please.
That Form 39,
Mhm,
if you don't put that in that contract and it goes mutual,
mhm.
you have a mutual contract with that buyer and you have a mutual contract with the other buyer. You have 2 mutual contracts on one property.
If there's an offer that comes in, it bumps the first one. That second offer has to have a Form 39.
Oh, I see. If you're representing the seller,
If
is that what you're saying?
Yes, if you're representing
Okay.
the seller, always can, because a lot of times agents, even if they see that it's contingent on the MLS, a lot of times they won't include a Form 39 in their offer,
Right.
even though they know they're writing a second offer. So you take that and you counter it with the Form 36 and you say adding a Form 39. So Form 36 and 39 would go in back to the buyers and say, hey, let's check all these boxes.
So 39 is only when you are bumping though, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
If I'm representing the seller, I have a contingent sale. And by the way, this is before I give the bump notice to my buyer.
Right.
I want to make sure I negotiate this deal first
Right.
before I bump them.
Right.
And during that period, if I receive an offer without a Form 39 in it, I've got to be up on my contracts enough to not let them sign that without a counteroffer going back where we attach a Form 39 to it.
Okay. That makes sense.
And not only that, that Form 39 has all of these options in there where I can get that buyer to approve Form 17 and inspections and things. If I can say, if you want me to accept your offer,
Right.
I want you to waive 17. I don't want to be second double dipping on the inspections,
Yeah.
and you're negotiating.
Yeah.
You can't do that without a Form 39.
Okay.
Another thing in a Form 39, it has the language by which if I do have a contract with both of them, which I will, is with the provisions that make it legal in saying that I have permission to either let this buyer go or this buyer go, depending on what happens. So I'm telling that seller up front in Form 39, hey, look, I have a contract over here that's contingent. I'm going to give them a bump notice, but in that bump notice, they could waive and want to keep the deal.
Right.
If they do, you're gone.
Right.
if you don't have that language in your contract, you can't do that. You can't fire that. You can't kill that contract.
Right.
You got to fulfill it.
So you're under contract for 2.
Man, you're
Yeah.
in, your designated broker is not going to be happy.
Yeah, no, makes sense.
Okay.
It's inevitable that lawyers would get involved. with that.
Oh, ooh,
I mean,
ooh.
yeah, a lawyer might tell you that the first contract supersedes the second one, but
Right.
But that's after you pay.
that's what a lawyer might tell you, not me.
I got another one here for you. Hold on a second. There's 22. What is it? Q. Where is it? Okay. Here's a little. This is right out of one of the hotlines. But if you're the seller broker and the seller sells to a buyer with a Form 22B, the seller gets a new offer from the second buyer. Form 38A is used by one of the transaction brokers drafting the PSA contract forms on the way to reaching mutual. So many times buyers will pick the wrong form and shove them into the purchase and sale agreement. And you need to be smart enough to have your alarms go off, because 38A does not provide the contingency language that your seller needs to deliver the bump notice to the buyer and then say farewell to the second buyer if the home sale contingent buyer number 1 ends up satisfying and waiving the home sale. That's just what we just talked about. Hey, I want that house so bad, I'll waive all the contingencies. Don't bump me. I want to go pending. And now you have to turn around to the other buyer and say, go away. If you don't have that language, you can't do that. And a Form 38 does not have that language in it. Only a Form 39 does. This circumstance, by using a Form 38A, not 39, the seller reaches mutual with the second buyer. The seller has entered into a binding contract to sell the buyer's house.
Now,
This,
Tom, real quick, Form 38A, that's a backup offer. Without delivering a notice to that backup buyer that the first contract had fallen out, then they're not the first place buyer.
no, they're not.
You wouldn't be obligated to sell the house to 2 different people.
No.
But you would have somebody who thought they were bumping someone, but in fact, they're not. They're just sitting in second.
They're sitting in second position.
Yeah.
See, it is a binding agreement that becomes a sale only if the first sale fails to close. But do not use this addendum if the property is subject to the contingent purchase and sale, i.e. buyer's sale of property contingent addendum 22B. The seller wants to accept an offer from a second buyer within the intention of bumping the first buyer. In such case, Northwest MLS Form 39 does that. And in this case, the real estate brokers bear the responsibility for creating a contract with the use of the wrong forms in the client's transaction. Both brokers in this deal have breached the standard of care, and the lawyers representing the parties will argue to determine the damages. This is on. I put a link on this, and you'll have that, because this video goes through that very clearly. It's one of the hotline videos. And the thing is again, our first duty in a limited capacity of lawyers, selecting the right forms. And so if we're tuned up on this comes in with the wrong form, going, no, excuse me, we'll write a counter offer back and we'll delete 38A out and put 39 in. And then we'll continue our counter offer process till we get mutual with the right forms. Okay. So I want to point that out. So this is where things start, we start having potential for things going sideways. And there's always a lot of motions with it, and people are always trying to move quickly. So seller issues the bump notice. Now, once they have mutual from agreeing to what was on 39 and go mutual, so now you issue the bump notice. And 22B, 34 through 37 and Form 46 is the actual bump notice. Now, by the way, these next 2 sections get pretty complex, like what we just went through. With what we're doing today, all of the forms and this form I'm sending out today.
Awesome.
And what I would like to recommend is you're seeing where I'm using this and how I'm going. I'd like to send it out and then have you take a look at it. And I'd like to come back next week and answer any questions that you have on it and then pick up where we're at and go forward. Would that work for you?
I think this is good.
Because you're getting, there. I don't have duct tape so my head don't explode, but it's, you can kind of get numb after a while, going back with this. But what I want is confidence if we use this together, that you'll feel confident in using this as a tool if you get one in the future and help stay on track. But if that works for you, I'd like to do that.
May I ask 2 quick questions?
You bet. Yeah.
So first one would be, does the buyer, if for whatever reason the buyer wanted to pull out of the deal before the 45 days that was on the contract, do they have any right to do that?
You're talking about the contingent buyer?
Yes.
Man, I might have to do
Has
my.
their home sold yet or not?
No.
Okay.
My understanding is that since they're in the contract, they're obligated to those 45 days. I couldn't find anything in the contract stating otherwise.
Yeah, I don't know of any provision that I've read that has any kind of escape clause out of the contract.
Okay.
I mean, they could try to sabotage their financing there's all, if buyers want to wiggle out of the contract, they usually find a way, but yeah, you're right. There is a
Well,
contraction.
no, but we'll time out.
Yeah.
You've got a title addendum. You've got a Form 17. You've got an inspection.
Mhm.
So you have quite a few tools
Right.
that you have until they all expire. And once you go past that point, you've got, you're in a contract to fulfill going forward. Now, if 45 days happens and you don't have a mutual, then it's automatically terminated.
That was going to be my second question, is when you get to those 45 days, I'm representing the buyer, their home is on the market right now, right?
Mhm.
So once we reach that 45 days, I couldn't remember, is there a form that I have to send to them?
It's
stating,
terminated.
or it's just terminated?
Form
at those-
50.
Okay.
There's no need for a notice because the contract is dead right at that time, at that point.
Okay.
Now, if you want to, you'll have to do a Form 50 to get the earnest money
Earnest money,
distributed.
sure. Okay.
But you do not need to give a notice to anybody on that.
Okay.
Some of these things you do, some of them you don't. That's one that you don't have to.
Okay.
Good to know.
Thank you.
I think that concludes contracts class for
Yeah,
today.
yeah, I think I'll do it for today.
All right, awesome. Thanks
Hey,
everybody
thanks a
for
lot.
joining. We'll see you next week.
And anybody, Lupita or Deborah, do you have any questions today?
Peter dropped off. Yeah.
No, that was just awesome. It was just excellent, Tom. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. Did you could hear everything okay?
Oh, very good. Very good.
Okay, well, stand by because when I get home, I'm going to send a whole bunch of stuff to you.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, you take care.
Look-
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.